Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the West Fargo City Commission meeting, Tuesday, September 3rd. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. We have one addendum on the consent agenda, and it will be item M, and it is a request for a permit for charity for the West Fargo Packer Backers. So if you please add that as M, request for a charity event for the West Fargo Packer Backers to benefit the students at West Fargo High School.
I'll make a motion to approve with the change.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda with the addendum of item M. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order is item C, the approval of the minutes of August 19th, 2019. They are been distributed. They are in the packet, and they are pages 2 through 4.
I'll move we approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson, is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 19th, 2019 as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Next order of business is the building permits. They have been distributed. They are in the packet. If any of the commissioners have questions, I'd ask that Mr. Solberg from Planning address them.
I move we approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to accept the building permits as distributed for Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019. Is there any further discussion? We'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is the consent agenda. There are items A through M with the amended item of M with the West Fargo Packers. They are in your packet and have been distributed.
Make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Thorstead moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as distributed with the addendum of item M. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item number 1 is a request to pursue a traffic impact study. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, we are bringing this forward to you, myself, City Engineer and Public Works Director, for 2 reasons. One, we want to not hit you blindsided with a contract down the road. We'd like to bring it to your attention now. And the other reason is we really want to make sure that you understand that we're on top of some development that's occurring west of kind of the Costco area and what we call the preserve. There's a couple of different developments, one which you'll review tonight, which has a possibility of greatly impacting traffic on 23rd and 26th as it goes up to Veterans. We think typically when we do a big project like that, we have the ability to ask for a traffic impact study. We think, though, however, there's a number of developments, and it might make a little bit more sense for the city to take a proactive role and actually conduct the study themselves. That way we can have ourselves involved in this and control the variables. We feel like it potentially has the ability to be a smaller scale study without needing to bring in Federal Highway Administration, and there's some of their rules and regulations that would apply. However, we do want to note that potentially it could become a bigger, more global study that could impact 32nd veterans and the interstate. If it does get to that case, we'll come back before you and reach out to Fargo-Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments, of which I've spoke with also today on this matter. So right now we're really just looking for approval to begin to discuss with some firms around the area, maybe even regionally, about doing a larger scale of a small scale traffic impact study, be led by the three of us, and kind of, like I said, bring this to your attention, make sure you know we're on top of it. So I do have a recommended motion, and I'm available for any questions, as well as Dustin and Chris.
Are there any questions for Mr. Sobert, Commissioners? For the purpose of the folks watching on television, would you please state the dollar amount of this impact study, what you're recommending, please?
I think we're going to, initially I thought it could be around 5,000. We're going to explore, just because of the amount of kind of studying the background of what the developments could be, we're looking at up to $10,000. We feel that after talking with Tina Fisk, a city administrator, potentially the capital improvement sales tax would be a good use of funds for that. We do think that spending this money may help us to reduce actually some improvement costs, looking at maybe some creative ideas like the amount of schedule, if we can work with businesses on their schedule, maybe a 7 to 4 and an 8 to 5, 9 to 6 type of thing. Really trying to get creative rather than just building our way out of traffic. So,
thank you. Commissioner Olson.
You state in here of a consultant. Do you have anybody in mind that you're going to contract with?
We know of a couple in town that this is pretty familiar work to them, but like I said, I think we're going to spend a little bit of time and maybe do a little exploration to make sure that we get the right person. Potentially there's somebody that has looked at something like this regionally as well. So.
Okay.
Additional questions? Thank you, Mr. Sobert. Would you share your recommended motion?
Recommended motion is to approve the pursuit of a traffic impact study for development within the preserve, with a condition that final awarding of a contract be reviewed and approved by the City Commission at a future meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Sobert.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the traffic impact study for the preserve area. Is there any further discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Sobert. Item number 2 on the regular agenda is a 5:30 p.m. public hearing for application for property tax exemption at 310 24th Avenue East. Ms. Roth.
Thank you, Commission President and Commissioners. This application is, like you said, requesting a 5-year pilot for the Enclave development pilot application. This will be for both the public hearing as well as the application itself. The address is 310 24th Avenue East. This is the farmstead just west of Costco. If approved, the start date of the project will be this month. The proposed building is a 60,000 square foot office space and estimated at $9.6 million in investment. The current value of the land is $322,800, which they will continue to pay taxes on over that 5-year abatement. Enclave Development, the applicant, will be taking 20,000 square feet and bringing over 105 employees, and then an undisclosed tenant will be leasing the remaining space in the building with over 150 employees. Here is a map just showing the location and in proximity of Costco there, as well as an overhead rendering. These are the valuations here of the 5-year pilot, with a total of $696,844 in abatement over that 5 years. And then I just have some renderings here, just a few of them that they sent over. You have all of them in your packet, just showing the proposed building. The EDAC reviewed this application at their August meeting and recommend approval. So a public hearing notice was published and sent to neighboring property owners as well. I did not hear anything back from anybody, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Austin from Enclave is also here and would like to share a few words with the commission as well, so.
Thank you, Ms. Roth. Welcome.
Austin Morris from Enclave Development. In pursuing this project, started a number of months ago, but in pursuing this specific location, we're currently Fargo based, our companies are. This location has an opportunity to be precedent setting for West Fargo. It's really the last remaining portion of developable land along 94 corridor, which is the highest traffic corridor in the community, and shows great, it shows great promise for something to this level of a Class A professional park. And this would include the farmstead site, and then also, hopefully over time, marching along toward Costco. You have about 32 additional acres of developable land. Not only does it have great access to veterans and a lot of retail, restaurant amenities, it also has quick accessibility to the Sanford Hospital. It has easy accessibility onto I-94 interchange. So we love the location. We've worked in West Fargo on a number of projects and look forward to the opportunity to design this and have this be our home base. The design, as you can see, we carefully planned out the pedestrian connectivity, the orientation of the building to take advantage of I-94 visibility while pushing it back as far as possible away from the residential development, Rivers Bend, so that the 3 stories would have minimal impact on them. Additionally, specific design was deployed related to paying homage to the site being an old farmstead. So the orientation of the building is amongst the trees. We put the building in the place to minimize the number of trees that we'd have to eliminate for the development. Additionally, provided outdoor opportunities for more of an experience-driven office building. So for West Fargo and Fargo for that matter, this building will be precedent setting. You have an experience-driven office building. Usually they're built with tenants in mind, but maybe not the people that inhabit the businesses. So when you look at the site plan, you'll see and take notice that from a walkability perspective, from a tenant or people, human enjoyment perspective, there's ample amounts of outdoor spaces on the front. There's the public outdoor space to the south of the main entrance. Underground parking was incorporated to get as much parking underneath the building to limit site paving. And then there's also connectivity throughout the site to the existing pedestrian walkways to get people to use the great design that was deployed for Rivers Bend neighborhood. So we're really excited about the project, and I think it's exciting along this corridor to have something set the stage for what more could come. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Commissioners, questions?
So what are the total number of employees that you think will be occupying this building when it's complete?
250.
250, okay, that's what I...
And you're relocating your corporate headquarters to West Fargo?
Yep, so we, Enclave, and its affiliated and sister companies have 105 staff.
Anything else for Mr. Morris? Thank you, sir. Are there any additional questions of Ms. Roth? And your Economic Development Committee reviewed this, and the recommendation is to support this?
Correct, yep, they reviewed this at their August meeting and recommend approval.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. At this time, we're going to close the regular agenda, and we're going to go to a public hearing. Is there anyone else that would like to speak with regard to this development specifically? Is there anyone that would like to speak to the application for property tax exemption at 310 24th Avenue East? Is there anyone that would like to speak to this issue? Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. We're back on, Commissioners, what's your recommendations?
Mayor, yeah, please, I have a question for Callie, if that's okay, Callie?
Yes.
So over the 5-year period, I'm trying to look here, how much will we give an exemption? How much will it be worth after 5 years compared to what it's worth today? The property value.
Okay, yes, thank you. The estimated value of the building is $9.6 million, and currently it is $322,800, so
after
$9 million and change.
$9 million, okay,
Yeah.
good enough for me, thank you.
Additional questions?
If not, I'll make a motion to approve the 5-year pilot. I think it's a good program. Hopefully welcome to the city of West Fargo.
Commissioner Simmons moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. It's been moved and seconded for the application of property tax exemption at 310 24th Avenue East as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Roth. Thank you, Mr. Morris. Next order of business is item number 3, is to review a pilot application for Enclave development. Ms. Roth. Is that all part of the same? Yes. I think we just proved that. Okay, you're done. Item number 4, a public hearing and first reading of zoning ordinance amendment to section 4-426-A R-5 Mobile Home Subdivision District. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to just pull up a map here to reference what I'm going to refer to. If you give me a second, please. Okay. So we're proposing an amendment to the R5 district. The R5 district happens to be a unique district in that it's only in one neighborhood in town. So it gives us the opportunity to make a change without having impacts to other districts, which is positive for me because I don't have to worry about unintended consequences. What we're doing here is Planning Commission reviewed this and is forwarding the recommendation for approval. There's a river setback within our whole community. It applies to any jurisdiction, anything we have jurisdiction over planning and zoning wise. That overlay is 100 feet from the established riverbank. The riverbank is established by the city engineer. And when they establish that, it in a lot of cases on river lots gives a very small footprint of an area you can build a home. That was established somewhere around 2005, I want to say, off the top of my head. Might be earlier. These homes were in place prior to that, so they're legal non-conforming structures, meaning they can maintain them, but they wouldn't be able to tear it down and rebuild it. Coupled with a front yard setback, very specifically in this neighborhood, if you're in the Cheyenne overlay, you really have an envelope of about a foot or two where you can actually have a home. In a lot of cases, what we try to do then is try to find out, is there a solution that we can provide that can maintain this neighborhood and also continue to provide value for the property owner. We feel like in this neighborhood, if we can remove that front yard setback requirement, there's a potential that some of these homes may be able to be rebuilt. In this case, it's a manufactured home subdivision, so a lot of people actually want to bring in a new manufactured home. We feel like this neighborhood offers the opportunity, if we remove that front yard setback, to allow for them to continue to stay there. So what we proposed in the R5 district is really simply in the yard requirements, and you'll see in the handout in red writing there, what we proposed is to remove the front yard setback only to which those lots to which that COSR, the Cheyenne River Overlay District, applies. And in that case, if they do have a zero setback there, they'd still have to have a 20-foot setback for their garage, so that if they park in front of their garage, they aren't encroaching on a sidewalk. So Within this neighborhood, the subdivision has more than adequate right-of-way for our road. It has 70 feet. Typically, we would have 62 feet on a local road, so there's plenty of room for expansion. Actually, they probably could even vacate 8 feet of that road if they needed to. So we look at this and we think that there's probably not a lot of negative consequences. It did offer up kind of an interesting discussion at our Planning Commission. There are a number of other areas of town that have the same problem. However, it's maybe a bigger discussion that we need to have at a future date. This is something that we can fix today. So, again, Planning Commission at their August 13th, 2019 meeting reviewed the proposed amendment and held a public hearing and are hereby forwarding the recommendation for approval. I'm available for any questions. I did work with Dustin a little bit on this map here. The map that I included is not official. It's really just to give you an example so you can look at and see what some of these homes have left for that rear yard setback requirement. And it's not a flood concern, it's a soil stability concern why we have that overlay district. So, and there is some examples within this neighborhood where that 100-foot setback is certainly needed. There is some major slumping that's occurred there. So we don't want to allow encroachment into that. I'd be much more comfortable allowing encroachment into that front yard setback.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Commissioners, any questions?
Just, Tim, if you could explain what that red hashed line signifies.
Sorry, I was starting to explain that and got sidetracked. So the hard red line there is what we believe would be that established riverbank line. We use the LiDAR data that we have to determine where that drop-off occurs, and so that's what we just kind of did, a quick one rather than having them go out and inspect it. The crosshatch is 100 feet from that red line, so that's where no development can occur. So they couldn't put a garage, a shed, really anything in that area.
So with this approval, if we approve it, if they wanted to replace the existing manufactured home, they could without a problem.
They would have to move it forward.
They would have to move it forward.
Yeah. So I'm not proposing to change anything with that riverbank overlay. I'm proposing to change the front yard requirement.
Oh, I see. Okay. I was confused too.
Sorry.
Additional questions from Mr. Solberg?
So how would a home, like if you, I don't know where it's at in this picture, but there's one with the entire, looks like almost like right there, exactly. So there's not even enough room if that home were to be destroyed, what have you. Even with this new setback, there can't possibly be enough room to put that back in there.
Not in its current alignment. So this is, like I said, kind of a unique neighborhood. The lots are actually relatively wide, and the new manufactured homes that are being constructed, if you flip it, you actually have enough room within there with the side yard setback to have a home in there.
But then really, how would you get the garage? I mean, in there, it doesn't.
You'd probably have to do something a little different with the garage. So our alternative, Commissioner Simmons, if you don't mind, Mr. President, our alternative really is we're leaving them with no value to that property. So we're trying to find a solution here that allows them to continue to have value on that property. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. The other side of it, and a lot of the buyouts that have occurred in our area, in Fargo specifically, have been soil stability. So.
Well, how did we get here in the first place, letting them in there? I mean, is this map drawn after they were there, or what?
Yeah, this map was long after they were there. This was initially actually
we have
part of
no
the
exemptions for them? Right now, there's no...
Currently, no. So people within our community that are along the river, we're going to have a bigger discussion in the future about how we deal with this.
A member of this neighborhood reached out to me. They wanted to replace an existing mobile home, and by the present code, there was an issue with it. So I sat down and visited with Mr. Solberg, and I personally believe that his planning and zoning, along with Mr. Solberg, have reached a very viable alternative for this neighborhood, and I commend you for that. Yeah,
Mr. President, the person in question, we actually denied the permit and they're left with a home on that property that is kind of becoming end of life, I'd say. And so then they're left then with a property that has no value anymore, because the home, the real estate on it doesn't have value, and then the property can't be rebuilt upon. So,
But do we not now sometimes give exemptions to that rule anyway?
not for property, not for homes. We, if with a geotechnical evaluation, they can encroach upon that with parking lots, driveways, et cetera, but not with a structure. And then they have to do a geotechnical evaluation, make sure that determine the property is sustainable for development. And looking at this area, it's likely that it won't be. So
this, it may not give them the best option, but it gives them an option,
An
is what you're
option.
saying,
Yeah.
at least something.
Well, yeah, the other option, I think, is detrimental to not only the property owner, but the neighborhood. Because if you look at the amount of homes along here that are along the river, and if each one of those becomes unusable, we're now talking about decimation of the neighborhood, I think,
Right.
too, so. And it does offer really a good affordable housing option for our residents, so.
Additional questions from Mr. Sobert? Thank you. What is your pleasure, Commissioners?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, one moment. I have to remove us from the regular agenda and go into a public hearing also. So if there are anyone that would like to speak to this, my apologies. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the issue of the zoning ordinance amendment to section 4-426-A R-5 mobile home subdivision district? Is there anyone that would like to speak to this issue? Hearing none, we close the public hearing portion. Mr. Jurdevig.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Jurdevig moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstad seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the first reading of zoning ordinance amendment to section 4-426-A R-5 mobile home subdivision district. Is there any further discussion? Being none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 5. It's the final plot approval and approval of a PUD amendment of Oak Ridge 18th edition. Mr. Sobert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, we received this application to replat and amend a portion of what was previously a PUD of the Hadley Meadows development, and then to increase what has been known as the Oak Ridge commercial condo development. The applicant has provided a preliminary plat, final plat now I should say, and proposes to continue the district standards of the previous condo development. If this commission recalls, with that condo development, there's a certain style to each one of the condos. There was authority given to the planning staff to determine whether or not those buildings were meeting that standard, and it's been going okay. There's some issues within there to make sure we get enough parking. Each one of them is kind of on its own for parking. We've not come before you with any need to reduce parking there, so they've been able to take care of that. What they're looking at doing is the previous development had all of Hadley Meadows coming in here, and Oak Ridge is up here. What they're planning to do is extend that Oak Ridge condo development down to include a few more of the condos, and then to wrap up the rest of the Hadley Meadows development with these single-level Rambler-style townhomes. Connection will occur in there, and I did include in your packet an exercise that we required of the developer to just run a garbage truck and run a fire truck down to make sure they can make the turns. And then you'll also note that there's another parking lot added where this was going to be a condo, another condo here, but they're putting a road to come through down there and additional parking. What staff proposes with that is with these homes here, or these condos, that during our permitting phase with the addition of this parking lot, we can reduce their requirement by 1 parking stall per each condo. Most of them aren't using a lot of parking. It's kind of a insurance person or artist studio, things like that, where there's not a lot of parking required. So having that overflow is helpful. I think there's maybe demonstrated benefit for them that they could get one less parking stall required each. At our first public hearing, there was some concern from the neighborhood on how the HOA is going to continue to be funded. If you recall, these are all private roads in here. Underneath that private road is public infrastructure, but we require them to maintain that road. So those concerns were addressed after our meeting. They had another public open house with the developer in the neighborhood, and we included in your packet some comments from those neighbors that are stating that they now approve of that. So we feel like that's been addressed. We do have just one other thing we need to add to agreement, which I did discuss with the developers today. This pond previously was an amenity of Hadley Meadows. We recognized early on that it no longer really is an amenity for them anymore because now the condos would be adjacent to it. So the developer of the condo development has purchased that and will transfer that to the condo association. So now we want to see that HOA document and also include it in our agreements, and I've already expressed that and have no issues with that. So yeah, with that, I'm available for any questions. There's no public hearing scheduled tonight. It is just PUD amendments. But we did have a public hearing, and they had 2 open houses, so I feel like the public has certainly been informed on this project.
Thank you, Mr. Silver. Additional questions? What's your pleasure, gentlemen?
I move we approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve approval of the PUD amendment of Oak Ridge 18th edition. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstead seconds. When moved and seconded, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is the review committee selection for downtown rebranding project.
Good evening, Commission President Zardes and Commissioners. I come before you with just a quick item. The Downtown Rebranding Selection Committee has provided you with a recommendation to hire AE2S. This was done after the committee met to review the 7 applications we received from different firms. There was a mix of firms in the region and outside of the region. We then whittled it down to 2 firms and interviewed them, and after that, it was a very tough decision. The 2 final firms, AE2S and Flint Group, were very close, but we ultimately decided to go with a recommendation of AE2S because of their strong market research proposal. They had a real focus on authenticity and creating a brand that could be embraced by local residents, as well as their ability to test the brand outside of the Fargo-Moorhead area. So with that, in your agenda packets, you have their full proposal as well as the contract to sign. There's also a representative from AE2S here tonight, Andrea Bowe. She's the communication practice leader that will be working with us, and I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you, Mrs. Richard. Commissioners? Questions for Mrs. Richard?
So the focus of this project is just downtown. This
Absolutely.
is not rebranding the city.
Nope, not at all.
Right.
Downtown, we initially had that set as the area of Cheyenne Street from Main Avenue to 7th Avenue, but based on feedback from you guys during the commission meeting and further discussions during our review, we understand that downtown area really represents a little bit larger than that, including the neighborhood that's surrounding that stretch, and will be important key stakeholders to engage in this project as well.
Again, for the viewing public, would you state the amount of this contract?
The contract, the final budget estimate came in at $14,825, I believe, and that was slightly under the $15,000 that we had estimated for this project.
In your discussions, the Downtown Business Association, were they intimately involved in the selection process?
Yes, our committee was comprised of a member of the Downtown Business Association, Amy Haas with Epic Properties was there. We also had Charlie Johnson from the Convention and Visitors Bureau because they also provided funds, as well as myself, Tim Solberg, the Planning Director, Callie Roth, the Economic Development Specialist, and Tina Fisk, City Administrator, was in on the final interviews, as well as Commissioner Jurdovik was there.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from Mrs. Richard? What is your pleasure, Commissioners?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Jurdevig moves to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Olson. Then moved and approved to sign the contract for the downtown rebranding project as presented by Mrs. Richard for AE2S for the total dollar sum of $14,000 and change. I apologize, I didn't write down the total amount. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Richard. The next order of business is fueling our future discussion. Mr. Joe Rosso is here from Fargo Economic Development. Welcome, Mr. Russell.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Commission President and Commissioners, Tina and staff. Wanted to take this opportunity to hopefully have a little dialogue and provide all of you an update on the activities that have taken place over the last several months since I was before you representing the joint partnership between the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Corporation and forming what we're calling Fueling Our Future. Since I had the opportunity to present to you, we've had a number of initiatives underway. I'll just take a few minutes to share a little bit about those various initiatives, but first want to thank you for your leadership in being the first public entity to make a significant commitment to this regional initiative to support, I'll put in my words, what I call big rock issues for our regional economy. These are topics and programs of work that are being addressed by multiple organizations, because no one organization by itself could take the lead and do all the work necessary to get the kind of results that we've been talking about for nearly 2 years now under the Chamber's leadership, and for the last year with involvement from the Economic Development Corporation. I want to thank the Commission and Mayor Dardis for his time serving now as a member of the Governance Board for Fueling Our Future. I, in my role as the head of the Regional Economic Development Organization, also serve on that board and drew the long straw tonight to get to come and present to you, which I'm very happy to do. I do have here with me also Katie Ralston. Katie heads up the education initiatives for the Chamber and stands by the side of me and Craig Whitney and the board leadership on many of the initiatives and things that we're working on. Just quickly share with you the 3 pillars that we talked about several months ago, those being people, workforce initiatives, place, and prosperity. And under each one of those, there are various number of programs that we put in front of the public in a news conference several months ago that we held out at Sanford's new location. The first was dealing with people. And when we think about the long-term strategies for our regional economy, it really starts and ends with human capital. And we know when we think about long-term, we have to have a marketplace that's not only going to serve the immediate needs of our companies, but be a place that they can see their workforce growing as they change to compete both locally and with the national economy. And therefore, right away when we announced this initiative to the public, we announced that we were going to be supporting the career academies, both on the Minnesota and the North Dakota side, both in Cass County and in Clay County. And we made that announcement, and then about a month ago went in front of the Cass County Commissioners, asking them if they would consider being the lead entity from the public sector side to support the infrastructure needs for building such a facility here in Cass County to support the needs of our school districts and also NDSCS with looking at new location to bring all of our students together with the expertise from the teachers, both at the high school and the post-secondary level. And this is something that we've spent quite a bit of time doing. We're also working across the river in Minnesota with Clay County. They've got a bond referendum coming up on November 5th. And so we're going to be working as they get forward with that referendum on getting messaging out to support that on the Minnesota side, and continuing to support the private sector fundraising and Cass County's efforts for public sector for the Career Workforce Academies. Here in a few weeks, and you'll be receiving notice on this, we're going to be bringing in one of the most recognized national site location consultants, a gentleman by the name of Phil Schneider. Phil is being asked by the Fueling Board and our partnership with the cities, with the utilities, especially being led by Xcel Energy, to bring Phil in to talk about the creation of a regional certified shovel-ready site program. We've already identified 4 to 6 sites in West Fargo that we think might meet or come close to meeting a certification. The reason we want to do that is a lot of times companies, both existing and ones looking at our market, when they consider locating, they want to know that the site that they're building on has all of the assets in place so that they can begin construction. And we feel that having a program like that will make us competitive nationally. And so Phil's going to come in and support us in those efforts. And also as part of that, we know that one of the other initiatives that we shared early on with Fueling was to continue, and this was just a topic you were talking about just for downtown West Fargo, is how you brand a marketplace. And we're going to utilize Mr. Schneider and his network of other national site consultants to work with us to better inform those professionals on what it's like to do business here and the advantages of our entire region to support growth in attracting people and companies into the region. Lastly, I'll mention we had talked about mobility issues for the region, especially as it relates to air service. We're in the process of standing up a air service task force. We've been meeting with various leaders, including Sean Doverstein out at the airport, to bring together the appropriate business leadership to make sure that as we move forward with issues that are related to the airport, that we have the voice of the business community speaking on what they feel are the priorities to make sure that the airport is serving our businesses, and in doing so, we know that's going to serve the citizens as well. So already there are many things moving with the initiatives that we announced several months ago, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some of those with you and take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Gentlemen, any questions?
Joe, where are you sitting right now with Moorhead as far as them contributing and as far as them being involved with this?
At this time, in terms of an investment, Moorhead has not made a decision on an investment into this initiative, though we have had some conversations, and I presented to the City Council in Moorhead a couple months ago, and we'll be following through with those discussions. Moorhead also is having some discussions related to the state of Minnesota's law on its involvement in membership organizations like the Chamber. So there's a couple other issues that impact their decision making because of our partnership with the Chamber, and pretty much all investors in Fueling Our Future have to be an investor in one or both of our organizations.
Okay.
For all the commissioners, for your knowledge, the Fueling the Future has forwarded to the city. Mrs. Fisk has it. Our commitment, and we'll be executing that in the very near future, I would assume. One point that I'd like to make as one of the board members of Fueling the Future is I think that the initiatives that, as Rosso just outlined, are important. For example, air service to our community, and Mr. Rosso mentioned, you know, the importance of that to the business community. But as recreational users of that too, the number of boardings are up and all those types of things. So affordable airfares and accessibility to that type of travel is very, very important to a vibrant community, because there's many times that with regard to the business community, they won't come here if there's not good access to major markets of which they can fly into at a reasonable price. So it isn't just on one item type thing when we're talking about whether it's the Career Academy. There's a diverse listing of very worthy items that the board is working on, and I commend all of my fellow board members for that initiative.
The one thing we might want to look at, fellow commissioners, is I know I put an amendment on there, and I don't know if I put Fargo Moorhead on that amendment or if I just put Fargo. So Tina, maybe you can fill me in on that, how we did that.
Yes, Commission President and Commissioner Simmons and other commissioners, as well as Joe. I had pulled up, excuse me, the minutes from that meeting quite some time back, just so I could keep track of this issue. And basically, after discussion, it says Commissioner Simmons moved and Commissioner Olson seconded to approve the $100,000 over 4 years contingent upon a joint effort with the City of Fargo and pending a document being brought back for board approval. So by a document, I'm not sure if you meant like an agreement. We basically here have, what they gave us is, this is your commitment, and this is your commitment over the 4 years. So I'm not sure if that's sufficient.
Okay, I just meant, Tina, that if I put Moorhead in there, we'll figure out how to work around it. But I don't think I mentioned Moorhead anyway, did I? I think it was just Fargo, wasn't it?
You mentioned just Fargo at the time, which I'm not sure where Fargo's at either. So I'm sure Joe can say.
Yeah, your leadership led to a long discussion with the Fargo leadership and their commitment as well. So. We believe strongly that the private sector has to foot most of the bill for these types of initiatives. That's what you see nationally. But without the public sector alignment, these things tend to fail, and that's why that 80-20 balance between private and public is so important.
And I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure that we did it right, so you don't walk out here today and have to call Tina next week again. So it's right. So.
Well, we'll talk, but it might not be about that.
Right. So it is a consensus of the commission that Tina can move forward, Mrs. Fisk can move forward and execute that agreement?
Yep.
Would you like a actionable item on that, Mrs. Fisk, or is just the consensus? Thank you, Mr. Shockley, for your advice. Gentlemen?
I'd make a motion to proceed.
Commissioner Jurdovic moves to approve the funding mechanism that we've agreed to with regard to Fueling the Future. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstad seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for coming to join us this evening, Mr. Rosso.
Yeah, thank you.
I commend you and Craig Whitney and each of your respective boards and your leadership for this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you for your partnership. Look forward to meeting with all of you.
And I'd ask Ms. Ralston to please take that back to the Chamber Board and to Mr. Whitney also. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next order of business is item number 8, is a discussion of noise concerns on the Sheyenne Plaza. And Amy Kempler is on the agenda. Amy? Is Ms. Kempler here? All right. Mrs. Fiskus, have you had any direct correspondence with Mrs. Kempler?
Other than just the emails, we went back and forth. I have not, but I know Courtney informed me before we came to the meeting that she had tried emailing both parties to contact them to remind them that they were on the agenda. So maybe her questions have been answered, or maybe something else came up. I'm not sure.
She's reached out to me. I've had a personal conversation with her and an email or two that she has sent me about her concerns. So, and those concerns, just for public knowledge, were shared with Mrs. Fisk and the police department, Chief Yankee, as well as Epic Management's team, that there were concerns about that. So, being Ms. Kempfer is not here this evening, we'll move on to item number 9, and that is a discussion of noise concerns also at the Sheyenne Plaza. And Mel Thorson.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners, for your time this evening. I'm just going to give you a quick brief history on what brings me here tonight. First of all, I love my neighborhood. I was hired at South Elementary as a special education teacher, and quickly within a year moved my 3 boys to the neighborhood, so I knew that they could go to that school and be part of the neighborhood. I love the neighborhood. 2 months after I bought the house, which was May of 2016, this project was announced. I believe it was in July is when it became public. And we knew that there'd be some changes along the way. Construction, of course, there were things that affected our house. I kept in contact with construction companies, and they always made adjustments for us, whether it was accessing my garage or parking or anything like that. It was then that 4th Avenue was closed. So I met with Matt Marshall after that, and I just wanted to meet with him and say, okay, how many more surprises are there going to be? Because I am at 401 Morrison, I'm directly behind the plaza right now. So things were happening quickly. The garage door, or the parking garage goes directly behind my garage for the apartments. So if we're not watching really close, we can crash too. So anyway, I met with Matt Marshall. He informed me about the plaza, which had been rumored by construction workers. He told me that the original plans were for morning yoga, watching Bison games on the TV, and for weddings. And I remember laughing, thinking my kids would be on the trampoline during weddings, and that would not be great. But then he assured me that he'd be in touch if anything changes. Then we had the VFW open. A couple issues there, met with VFW, and we resolved them. Great having them as backyard neighbors now. There's been a few things with the city that are still kind of bumps in the road and are affecting the quality of life in my home, and I haven't felt any traction, or even it's felt like disrespect, to put it one way, on any of these issues that we've been bringing up. And I will go over a couple of them. Number one, these events at the plaza. One, I know on our agenda tonight it's about the noise, and that is definitely does affect my home. I have, some of you may have seen some videos that I've sent. In my home, my house rattles a little bit when they're playing, and so that's once a week at least that it affects our house. And the time that it goes to has varied between, some have stopped right at 8, some about 9:30, and a couple of Saturdays ago was the big night that went till about 11:20. So noise is also an issue, but parking during those events is also an issue. I was reading through the comprehensive plan, which I've checked a couple times here and there. I think it's an amazing plan. Who doesn't want a downtown area like that? And there's no reason I would not want to live there. I'm in walking distance from a great restaurant, donuts, and soon to be coffee. Super excited about it. But the concept of hidden parking that I read in the comprehensive plan is, I have questions about that, because when the hidden parking, so it improves the walkability of the neighborhood, but hidden parking is actually on my street, and so it's hard for us to find parking in our neighborhood. Another one is garbage collection. I've worked with the city on that. During construction, they moved garbage collection from the alley to the front of our homes, and our garages are all in the back. I tried getting that moved back to the alley, and that didn't happen either. It's just cleaner. There's garbage cans outside the front of our street most of the week because of the distance, and especially in the winter. So that brings me here tonight for finally was the concert the other night that went really late. We looked online before filing any complaints, and it said the noise ordinance is 10 p.m. on weekdays, and then I think it just says all we can find is later on weekends. So I want to just clarify how that's communicated to the public, and just so that we know. I think we all have some concerns about the communication as things keep coming. Like I said, when I met with Matt Marshall, I was like, okay, what's next, what's next, what's next? And that concert that went till 11:20 was one of those things. It's definitely affecting my family. And so as I brainstorm ideas, I'm thinking maybe revisiting the curfew on weekends, maybe improving communication with the neighborhood. I know there are some things that can be done with the sound barrier. I read it in the news this week about Zorba's that did something. My yard is about 20 feet from the stage, and so it is so loud. Also, cruise night. I'm a big fan of cruise night. There used to be a buffer, a block. Now it's in my backyard once a month. Still a huge fan of cruise night. But all I'm saying is there has to be a separation, I feel, from that community space and my residents and my neighbors. Those are a few ideas I have come up with to make that a better quality of life for my family. In every other situation, we've made compromise, we've worked towards a solution, and it's been great. And this one, a few things just haven't gone anywhere, and that's why I asked to be on the agenda this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Thorson. Mayor, any questions, please?
Yeah.
Mr. Simmons?
Yeah. I will speak just a little bit about it. I am the president of the West Fargo Events down there, which maintains that property, and we have taken your concerns very seriously down there. We've made some changes, such as the Thursday nights, we moved them to 7 to 9 instead of 8 to 10, so they would be done. And I do, if the commission doesn't mind, Mr. President, I want to bring up Mike Amundsen. He's actually the executive director, and so he can fill in the neighborhood what we're doing behind the scenes. And unfortunately, yeah, we haven't been good at communicating to you. But he can kind of explain the history and where we're at today, and then we can get together after this meeting, even go forward with trying to get more concerns of yours. Because this is a neighborhood park. This is a neighborhood. This is a downtown event, and you're very much a part of this. So we need to keep you in the loop. We need to keep you, knowing what's going on so we can solve the concerns. But if it's okay, I'd like Mike to get up and speak a little bit on it, unless Mayor, you have other things to say first.
Is that all right with you?
Sure.
Mr. Amundsen, West Fargo Events Director.
Hello, Mike Amundsen, West Fargo Events. To address a few of the items from Ms. Thorson's list, we have already begun the process of fixing some of these small disputes, like you had said. Nothing that is brought to our attention can't be resolved. So we're working on, for one, getting sound decibel readouts from the city department that handles that. Mr. Freeman was there at our concert last Thursday, so we were able to take some readings to see what our noise impact is on the immediate neighborhood. 11 readings were taken overall throughout the course of the evening, with the ambient sound starting at 55 decibels for the beginning of the night, just for reference. Also, we're working on gathering some quotes on some permanent and temporary barrier options, and then those would simply be put forth to the commission for information, and if you would like to make an action item of those, you certainly would be able to. Those are not prepared yet. I'm working on gathering that information right now with a few different suppliers. The last two things on my list that we have already begun working on are improving the communication between the city departments and me and my staff. We have already improved the communication with the police department, as well as just getting information out to the communications department as well, so that we can disseminate that information appropriately when we have rentals and events going into the evening. And then lastly, we are reevaluating the rental rules and policies that we put forth to any of our renters on our spaces to hopefully get ahead of any of these potential issues before they become a issue in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Amundson. I have a question for Mrs. Fisk. You have a comment. I have a question for you too. So, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Commission President and Commissioners. I just wanted to add to what Mike said and reaffirm some thoughts that I had before. I think it'll be really important to try and find a way for us to create a database of the people, the way to contact people that live in that neighborhood that are interested, so that we as a city or as West Fargo Events, we can include you in on relaying that information, because I can honestly agree that we as a city have not done well getting that out, and it is important. It is your life and it is your home. And so I'll find some type of way. Not everybody likes to communicate by email. I understand that. So I would need you guys to reach out to me or get to your neighbors as well and ask them what forms of communication would you like to see, so that we can come to a consensus. And as development goes forward, if we have big things coming up, we can always do like a neighborhood informational meeting, so that you can see what's coming up in the next construction season that might affect your property and things like that. I mean, we're all in the learning stages of this plaza, and this downtown stuff is all new to us too. So we appreciate what you've put up with and your patience, and we do want to continue to do a better job of that. So I promise we will be working on that. So if you could reach out to me and reach out to your neighbors, and however you want me to communicate, then our group, our team in West Fargo, we can find a way to get that disseminated out to you, along with West Fargo Events. I know they did some door-to-door flyer stuff a couple times, but maybe we can work on a better communication plan. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Commissioner Jurdevig?
A couple random questions. First off, the event we're talking about from a few weeks ago that I'm sure I wasn't the only one that got a few emails on. I'm sure we all did. Was that the 24th?
It was a Saturday night, yeah. Okay,
I think that was the 24th. So that wasn't West Fargo Events, right? That was actually the VFW that put on that event? Is that a correct statement?
That was a motorcycle ride.
It was a private.
Yeah, the VFW did not.
It was a private event, ma'am. Yep. It was private.
But wasn't it approved? I mean, I'm looking right now at what we approved in the Liquor Control Board for public alcohol consumption until 10 p.m. on August 24th.
Right. But if we could, so the commission knows, because I don't think the entire commission knows, and even the neighborhood, explain what happened on that Saturday night and what you did to rectify it, that they probably don't even know, as far as calling the police and, the whole bit.
Mr. Amundson.
On that Saturday evening, there was a notification that the music had run later than the 7 to 10 p.m. That we had previously agreed upon, and so then initially the renter had put an end to the music, and the band had begun packing up their belongings, and then when the renter had left the premises before the band was actually done packing up, the band apparently had figured that out, and then they started playing again after a brief hiatus. And so at that point, I got further notification that the band had started back up again. I had called the police department and asked them to get involved on shutting down the party.
Mrs. Thornton, you don't give yourself enough credit. There's a whole lot of folks that are listening to your comments about not only tonight, but in previous. There's been a lot of discussion. Was it your sons that were selling lemonade at the last?
Yes.
Yeah, they were two boys.
They're
real entrepreneurs.
One thing about that event being a fundraiser for autism, one of my sons is on the spectrum, and he had his noise canceling headphones on all night, cuddled up in his room, because it was, I just wanted to go out there and say, your idea is great, but it was really not it's affecting the people you're trying to support.
But I know, I want to make one more comment if I could, and I also know that I have conversations with the chief with regard to city staff, also public works staff, and the police department during cruise night, during these event nights, They're now monitoring the alley much closer. I personally have walked at about the last 3 events, just to observe if there's people standing back there having a drink or smoking cigarettes and those types of things, because there was an issue with that type of activity also. So, again, give yourself more credit that your comments are not falling on deaf ears. We're trying to find our way with how to deal with the public and the neighborhood also, and of course, that's very important to us.
Right, and I appreciate that very much. I just wanted to put a face to the messages too, because it's pretty, you gotta be a lot more brave to come here than to send out emails all the time, so.
The other thing we're doing is, and I don't, Mike, did you mention it? We're looking into like a surround wall, some type of a wall. That's what did you mention? I couldn't remember. So,
yeah.
So, you know, we definitely hear you. Like the mayor said, we hear you loud and clear. And so we'll be at your home more than you probably want from now on.
Awesome. All right. You're
welcome. We'll never achieve what we want to do if the neighborhood isn't involved in this whole discussion and the process. I have a question for Mr. Shockley. With regard to, you know, the private event activity that took place on the 24th, as Commissioner Jurdovic said, what the band did, okay? So Mr. Thorson and or city administrators with handing out permits, I think that that's a real breach in confidence in that particular group. And I hope that everybody remembers the name of that band, because if they're not following the rules of our city, I have no time for to continue to extend them the opportunity to display their talent. That's unconscionable that they would do that, in my opinion. So let's make the appropriate notes, because that neighborhood should not have been subjected to that whatsoever. You know, that's one of the things. I'm a member of the West Fargo Events Committee also, and that's one of the things that we hold very true is the hours of activity that takes place in there. Because during a school night, what's, you know, a reasonable Thursday nights is at a reasonable time of 9 p.m. And so we'll be better stewards. We'll certainly try to be better stewards.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
And Mr. President and Ms. Thorson, just so you know, I've had those discussions with Mike, and that band probably will not be back again. I mean, we have to put the rules down, so we're going to be very, very strict from now on.
Thank you for coming this evening.
Just a comment.
Commissioner Thurston.
The other thing with the lights at 32nd Plaza coming on, I think the West Fargo events should probably analyze the types of events and maybe put the lower impact events at the downtown plaza, and we'll have that one, which is really geared for entertainment and won't interrupt neighborhoods. So I think that's supposed to be coming on early next year. So I think that might be helpful to some of the people that want to have an event at the downtown plaza could do it down on Cheyenne and 32. So, and I think the other thing Ms. Fisk mentioned, I wholeheartely agree, is whether it's a liaison or somehow is getting the neighborhoods involved, because they actually can be an asset instead of a abrasive situation to where, you know, they might help be able to say, well, why don't we do this, or, you know, maybe that event would be better served somewhere else. So I want to make sure we reach out to that neighborhood and have them included in the discussions, particularly downtown there.
Mrs. Thorson, are some of these folks with you this evening in your neighborhood too? Well, we certainly thank you for your time of coming here and supporting the comments made by Mrs. Thorson, and we certainly will do all that we can to get better at what we're doing. So thank you for your time this evening. Next order of business is construction updates. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis, and good evening, members of the Commission. I'll try to be brief. Cheyenne Street, segments 2 and 3, really the focus is the mainline paving operations. The goal right now is to have all of the mainline paved by Friday next week. So pending weather, we hope to have that complete. That'll be followed by the continued work in getting the turn lanes and the medians and all that good stuff paved. The other projects in town, they're tracking. We've got a couple of the development projects that are wrapped up. And then we have our largest development project, Wilds 11th, is about 75% complete, really getting to the surface point of the project now. So And then the segment 1, we did have some of that corrective work. I mentioned that at the last meeting. It's been done, so I think now we're just in the getting segment 1 closed out. Segment 2 and 3 will carry over into next year. We will close those out next year. But really the focus here in the next week and a half is that mainline paving operation, and hope to have that done. And then ultimately between segments 2 and 3, we are hoping to by October 15th, maybe a week later, to have the majority of the street opened up for the traveled public. So I guess with that, I'll turn it over for questions.
Questions for Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Item number 11 on the regular agenda is our city administrator's report. Mrs. Fisk.
Good evening again, Mayor and Commissioners. I have a few items for you today. The first one is, and this one I need your approval or vote. Currently, Callie Ross has a seat on the Convention Visitors Bureau Board. She filled the position that Matt Marshall had for the city. We had a meeting recently after we were doing the selection of the committee, the group. Okay, let me talk. Sorry. When we selected the downtown rebranding group. Okay, now that I got my words right. Talked with Charlie, talked with Callie, and talked also with Melissa, Richard, and the consensus was that we want to recommend that you appoint Melissa Richard as the city liaison or the city representative on the CVB board for the next term.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Why would we do that? Would we want the director being on that board, the economic development director?
In speaking with Charlie and going through this, I mean, we're still in the process of trying to find and hire an economic development director. That is true, that person would. But Melissa has a unique set of skills with the promotion and communication and all those types of things that they found very inviting and interesting as an additional person on their board. And so that was why the choice of Melissa Richard was brought up. Okay. And it was actually brought up by Charlie. It wasn't brought up by staff.
So like well, I don't care about that, Tina, but so who's on there like for Fargo? I'm just saying, are they the same, like who does Fargo, do you even know have on there?
I have no idea who they have on there, I'm sorry.
Kelly knows.
Oh. Okay, Kimber from the city of Fargo, who is actually the assistant to the commission.
Okay, so it's nothing to do with really like the Matt Marshall position anyway then, he was on there because,
yeah.
Okay.
So I would need a motion to approve that, and I can inform the CDB.
I'll make that motion.
And a motion presented by Commissioner Olson that the Visitors Bureau representative will be Melissa Rich for the next year. Your second.
I will second that motion, but with a question to John, please, if I could. John, since this was not on the agenda or anything, can we even do this?
Yeah, it's a regular meeting. You can add things to the agenda. It's just at a special meeting, you can't add things to the agenda.
Or do we need to, I mean, we didn't even add this to the agenda. It just came up in her correspondence. So, I mean, doesn't matter. I don't care. I just want to get it right.
Procedurally, it probably should come up under non-agenda items because it wasn't on the agenda, but that would be the section to approve it under, which is right after the correspondence.
I apologize for that.
No,
I actually have
I don't mean anything by 18. I just,
No. Yep.
So, is it okay to go forward?
Yeah,
okay.
You can add things to the agenda.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to appoint Melissa Richards, Communications Director for the City of West Fargo, to the Visitors Convention Bureau Board. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Mrs. Fisk.
Yep. You all received an email last Friday from Melissa Richard explaining some purchases for Christmas decorations. She's coordinating with West Fargo Events and the downtown area. They're doing a lot of really fun things for Christmas this year. And we had talked about it last year, but didn't feel we were in a good enough place to even begin to start purchasing lighting and decorations. But in working with Mike and working with her committee that Melissa worked with, they've come up with the plan that was emailed to you last week with an estimated cost of $18,000. And the plan was to fund that through economic development sales tax. That was the discussion we kind of threw around last year. And the question came up because sometimes I just assume things that was that ever approved? And I'm like, well, I'm not really sure. So I thought I would ask you as a commission if you're comfortable with us proceeding with this use of sales tax. Normally these types of things we don't have to get approval of, but I feel this was going to have an impact because it's really kind of amazing what they're going to develop down there. And so I would like to know if it's okay to continue to proceed with that purchase.
Commissioners?
I trust these will be reusable and this isn't a one-time use?
Yep, this is not a one-time use.
And this is all through, I'm sorry,
please,
President, this is all through EDC tax, so it's not taxing property owners at all, correct?
Nope, it's economic development sales tax, which the more events we have down there, the more energy.
Which is what we're doing down there,
sales
exactly,
tax
so
develop.
totally, yeah. I'm okay, definitely.
I'm going to probably ask a silly question here, but being we have some great neighbors from that neighborhood in attendance this evening, are they neighborhood friendly with regard to the lighting mechanisms and all of that type of thing? They're not,
There's no music. No.
It'll be the light post and the tree.
We're going to ask, Mrs. Richard is coming up, sneaking up behind you, Mrs. Besson.
I just wanted to make a point that the lights are all LEDs, which means that they have that really directed light cast too, so there shouldn't be too much offhand ambient lighting. And the new light poles that are in place are a lot shorter than the former poles, so they'll sit a little bit lower to the ground as well. But they are meant to be used more than 1 year, absolutely. And we're hopeful that we can continue to make an impact and make it a destination to go look at the lights, for sure.
Thank you, Mrs. Richard.
Okay. So seeing no opposition, I will move forward. I wanted to make you all aware that we are starting this week a new phone system. It's an auto attendant. I know in the past we've had some issues where there's concerns over not being personal enough to our citizens if they get like dial push 1, push 2, push 3. So Jim and his staff have worked with all the different departments, to the people that have to deal with the phone calls and so on and so forth. And what they've come up with is something that will work for police, public works, as well as City Hall, to try and help our customers in the best way possible. And what happens is when someone calls, they get 3 options. 1 is utility billing or payment via phone. 2 is for public works, calls relating to streets, forestry, water, sewer, garbage. And 3 is City Hall or any other questions. And then if they push 1 and they want to do a payment by phone, it'll ask them, do you want to do payment by phone? If you do, push 1, otherwise stay on the line and they'll get answered right away by a staff person. So this would take a lot of pressure off, a lot of time off the plate of all the different people that have to be juggled around from department to department. It would streamline our staffing and our response time, I think, a lot better than the situation now. I think it's just time to get moving forward with this type of option.
And there's no option for a direct connecting to the police department? There's not a number 4?
I'm not exactly sure how they address the police department one. I think it's press 3 for City Hall or other questions, and then they'll field them and see, do they go to the court or do they go to the police department? But I can't say for sure. I just know the police department is also involved in this. I'm not sure if James, could you explain that?
That's for all non-emergency calls, correct?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
so,
Yes.
yeah.
This isn't anything just emergency.
So just off the top of my head, my recollection without looking at it, pressing, when you call there's the City Hall main number and there's the Police Department main number. If you call the Police Department and you press 1, it'll go to records, because that's one of the largest calls that they get. 2 will connect them with a dispatcher to dispatch somebody for them. 3, I believe, is the last option, is just to work with somebody within the police department where the clerks will answer the line. Yep, they'll have a separate phone tree as well. They work closely with Public Works and Finance to figure out how it all worked together.
Very good. Thank you.
And in addition, I want to thank James. He worked really hard with all the staff to try and find the most efficient and best plan to work with the public. So just kind of want to get you informed, and as anything, if we run into issues or we find that there's things that aren't working, we're going to continue to tweak it and make sure we have the best response time for our citizens that we can. One other item is, I just want to notify you, we had a wonderful year for mosquitoes, and at this point we have very little of our estimated contract funding left, and so we've been notified by Vector Control that there's a possibility that we may go over our planned budget for the year, which was $77,500. But they have done an excellent job, and with all the wet weather we've had, they've been really doing good. So I just wanted you to be aware that we're keeping track of all that, and then I'm going to give this to Jim to keep track of them. And the only other item I have for you is, President Dardis gave me this. There is a Denny Walker Community Leadership Award being presented at Bonanzaville on October 1st.
Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday? Okay. And he has stated that he would like to go, and I'd like to just let you know that if any of you would like to go as well, just let us know. Contact Courtney and she'll get you signed up. It will be presented to Bryce Johnson of the FMHBA this year. So that will be the person who gets that event, so that award.
And
so
it's
just
being
let
held
us
in
know.
Bonanzaville. Wow, nice.
And that is all I have. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Mrs. Fisk?
Okay, one last item. Remember, next meeting will be the final budget hearing. We're going to have a very nicely put together booklet. Melissa's been working hard with finance and all the other departments to pull it together and have a really nice document that the public can actually utilize really well, and we'll get that out to you. And we will have that on the next meeting. Jim's already put the publication out, so we're good to go.
Okay, so that's at the next meeting, and then and that will be the final approval then?
That will be the
we get the document the same day?
Oh, no, it'll come out to you before then.
Thank you.
It'll come out to you, if the latest you'll get it is the Thursday packet before. Right now there are no changes. Jim did relay with all staff, and we talked with people and tried to see if there was any items that they could pull out of their budget. We found more departments that said, well, I actually forgot some things, and we're like, well, there's no adding, so just subtracting. So at this point, everything is pretty much the same.
Tina, maybe when you get them done, you could just put them in our boxes and tell all the commissioners so they could get them prior to that Thursday, because it may take a little more time to go through them.
Yep, we sure will.
Whenever you get them done.
Okay, as soon as we get them done, I will have Courtney notify you, and we'll get them out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any non-agenda items that should appear before the commission this evening? I have one with the storm that hit yesterday in our community. I want to reach out and thank the Public Works folks. We had 6 lift stations down because of no electricity, and Chris and his team were on site with generators and making sure that they would be operational. I visited with 2 of his crews last night, and they're doing a heck of a job. Also, the fire department was out throughout the city with the power poles that were down and the like. Heath and his, the chief of Yankee, chief of police, the people were patrolling the neighborhoods. There was a large section of the community that was without electricity, and as went around the community and looked at the damage, the trees and all of that type of thing. I was so very proud of all of our various departments for the work that they were doing for our taxpayers. So to all of you, take it back to your teams, please. Thank you. Nice job. Under tough circumstances, but nice job. Are there any other non-agenda items? Commissioner Simmons, excuse me.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. I just seen if you're sleeping over there, Mike. All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Just checking, the recycling hasn't been done.